So, yeah, just to get things started then, if you just wouldn't mind telling me like a bit about your background, just so people can sort of get to know you better as like a person and like a musician, like sort of where things started, like your like I guess a bit about your upbringing, stuff like that.
Yeah, sure. So when I was well, 14, I decided at some point to become a musician, like full time. And that was actually because at the time I didn't realize that was even an option.
Yeah.
Things, people to do because I always loved music and actually at school I was really wanting to do veterinary stuff. So I wanted to be like a vet and go and do that and like years and years and I prepared and I did like really well in biology, everything like that. And then one day I had a conversation with my mom and I was like, oh, I love playing guitar because at that point I played for about 6 years, like kind of just for fun. Um, but I loved Queen and I really liked playing Queen stuff, and it was like, oh, I really enjoyed doing this. And then I think I did one performance of Linkin Park at school, with like a random group of people. It what probably was like terrible. If I watched it back now, I'd hate it. But at the time, the feeling of performance and like adrenaline I got was like the best feeling. And I remember thinking, oh, I'd really like to do this like properly, like a lot more. And it's only when I mentioned it then, and my mom was literally like, "Well, you know that you can actually do this as a career. Like people do actually do this, like for money." I'm like, "They do?" Um, and yeah, then suddenly I was like trajected down this whole path of, okay, now I want to do music as like a full time thing. So then I started looking for like colleges. So then I went to a place called BOA in Birmingham, which stands for like the Birmingham Ormiston Academy,
Mm,
and it's like a sort of like in London, you have these performing arts schools, and they're often aimed at like musical theatre people, actors, dancers.
mm.
Um, but this one did a course for musicians, like performers, as well as the MT. So it was kind of like people view it as like the London in Birmingham, like the London School in
Right.
Birmingham. But it was a great place to go, and I actually managed to get in, which I was really happy about because the chances of getting in were like really small.
Mm.
Um, because on the audition day, it was something like they even told us up front, like, don't be disappointed because it's something like only 1 in 8 people get a place.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
it's because they only had like 900 places in the whole building.
Right.
So if they're
That's
only adding
wild.
like 100 people a year or something, so it's like very small. I mean, we even
Mm.
had people from like South Africa come to audition.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, like it had a hell of a pull. Um, so yeah, I mean, mainly that is for the MT course, like the sort of musical
Mm.
theatre side of things, but music was still pretty tough. And so I went there, had a great time. I actually did like a charity album with people there, and like we raised some money for
That's
cancer
cool.
research. In the end, it was like 600 quid or something we made.
All right. That's not bad.
So yeah, it wasn't too bad. And I was like 10 recorded songs that are still on Spotify now. Um, but yeah, so that was a lot of that. And then suddenly I went to uni and did more performing. Um, and then obviously COVID happened after I finished my degree, and
Mm.
then nothing happened for like years. Um, did
Yeah,
a master's
we can all
degree.
relate to that, the COVID side of
Uh,
things.
yeah, no, it was definitely the worst era of music for me.
Mm.
And then to be honest, after that, I got in a relationship in 2021. It went on for like 9 months, and then literally the day I broke up with her, um, it was a case of I got a call on the taxi back home, to say, "Hey, do you want to play a gig
Right.
next week?" After like years of no one ever asking me that question, um, because like I'd been with a metal band before, in like 2019 at uni, and I'd contacted these promoters before and said, "Hey, we'd like to do some gigs in Birmingham," and it never came to anything at the time because we were, various reasons like split apart or whatever. Um, but then they just messaged me after 2 years, 2.5 years of me not like talking to them, and were suddenly like, "Yeah, we have a gig next like week at the Victoria. Would you like to play it?" And I was like, "Okay, I guess I will." And I said, "Do you want the metal band?" They were like, "No, no, just you." It was like, "Oh, okay." So I literally wrote together what 6 or 7 songs of my own material and like one cover, in like a week, and then just did it on my own.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
so yeah, basically started on my own, and then over that like year and a half, I pretty much just like started finding random people on the music scene, just said, "Hey, come play with me. Hey, come play with me." And
Right, yeah.
yeah, and now we have like a full band backing it, so
Yeah.
it's nice. But yeah, still kind of my project in a way. Um, so yeah,
No, that's really cool. That's quite a journey you've been on over the last like I don't know how many years it's been. So
well, it's
yeah,
gone
no, that's really
10 years,
interesting.
10 years nearly. Um, so yeah, it is what it is, I guess.
Hmm.
And it's I do like my storytelling. Um, so I try and put that in my songs where I can.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I enjoy doing what I'm doing now, and having the band is like something I never thought I'd have because in many ways, when they all joined up, I kind of told them like I don't want to make it into a proper band because we had an option like last year to change it into something where I could name it like
Yeah.
something else that wasn't Josh McQueen or whatever. And I said, to be honest, it's probably not worth it because I was in the nicest way possible. I was like, unless you're all going to contribute and write a lot of songs to go into this, that I'm like, yeah, I can't say I have anything to do with that song.
Hmm.
Um, it's probably not worth us changing it
Right.
because
Yeah.
as much as it's not like a brand as such, I think the name is recognized more in Birmingham now after the last year and a half. So like
Yeah,
in the
I can
music
get that.
circles, people go, "Oh, Josh McQueen, I've heard of you at least."
Yeah, yeah.
you know. Whereas if we change it now, then suddenly it's like, "Oh, you used to be Josh McQueen," and they have to like connect the dots. So
Hmm.
at the moment, yeah, I get better visibility, I suppose, just being me.
Right.
Um,
That's fair enough. Yeah. Just because you've been doing that for longer. Yeah. Yeah, that sort of brings up a new question I hadn't really thought of until now. So, because obviously the project is named after you first and foremost,
yeah,
and the other band members, they're kind of, from what I gather, you're like the brain, you're like the head of the group kind of thing. You make all the big decisions and stuff. Is that what I'm getting from that? In terms of like music, booking, do you like for each song or each like rendition of whatever song you're doing, do you like write each like instrumental bit, the vocals, everything? Do you do all of that and then they just sort of like go off what you've done for each
it's a
song, or do
yeah,
they
it's a great
like contribute bits as well?
yeah, it's a great question. To be honest, um, that there is contribution on their part, and
Mm,
and I make sure that even in like the most recently released single, I genuinely will put in the credits because you have different ways of crediting people on a song.
mm.
Um, so for example, I'm still the lead and only like composer, if you like. So like
Right,
I'm the
yeah.
lyricist and I'm the like sort of overall structure guy. But they all get like a performance credit,
Yeah, yeah.
which is basically like anything that they embellished or whatever, like or did differently to what I envisioned, totally fine.
Yeah.
So I don't write every part,
Okay.
especially with drums, because drums is the one thing that like there'll be some things I'll be specific about, but a lot of the time it's like we'll try like 8 different rhythms and I'll go, that's the
Mm,
one.
okay.
But people always throw in their ideas, and there is some back and forth, which I think is healthy in a band, because like to some
Mm.
extent, even if I am making the decisions, I will still need someone to like stop me and go, that's a terrible idea, don't do it.
Yeah, no, I
Um,
get that. You still want it to be like a collaborative process. You don't want it to be
yeah,
just like, oh, you do this thing, you do that thing. It's nice to have input from both sides. So yeah, I can totally get that 100%.
well, yeah, definitely. And like in a rehearsal last week, we were writing a brand new song. Like I'd had it like in the locker for about 8 months, and it was always the plan to do this song, but we hadn't actually workshopped it yet. Um, so I had most of the lyrics done, most of the melodies, and it actually came down to in the end, I was actually ended up being on the bass because I wrote the bass line in this scenario. So it was like, yeah, I did that, and then we had Mayor on drums, just like improvise something more funky, and saxophone just improvising something else. Um, so yeah, like in that sense, in probably about an hour, we had a very workable structure
Mm,
um, of a song that was already in my head, so I kind of knew where to guide it. Um, but yeah, like collaborative effort is what I prefer, to be
mm.
honest. I don't like being the lead of the operation. I don't mind leading, but
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, I don't like people to not credit other people for what they've done either.
yeah. No, that's totally understandable. Um, so yeah, I mean, you just mentioned that you've been sort of like piecing together and like rehearsing or recording new songs and stuff like that. Um, I noticed obviously you have put out a new single recently on streaming services, the track Imposter, I think it was.
Yep.
Um, yeah, is this like the start of what could be, potentially many more singles releases and maybe like eventually a larger project like an EP or an album? Um,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
cool,
yeah,
cool.
it will be. So at the start of the year, I released a little marketing video that I just did for fun, with a green screen and a hat. Um, and I did a sort of parody of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And throughout that, I like kind of listed some key times, frames, or like dates of where I will be planning to be releasing some singles. So this year we are actually planning to, and we are sticking to it so far, 6 singles for this entire year.
Okay.
Um, and then we've basically got another 2 singles releasing at the start of next year, um, which will then all lead up into like summer 2024, which is how far we've got currently, um, which will be like a debut album, basically. Um, because I'll be honest, there's 2 different schools of thought among the musician community about EPs versus albums. And to be honest, like every part of my body is telling me like you probably shouldn't do an album
Hmm.
because like we're not in an album economy anymore. We are in a single economy, and to be honest, even EPs these days are not really worth it, from a
Hmm.
musician's perspective, because like I've seen the analytics myself and it's terrifying. But like unless you have like a solid fan base when you're releasing that music, and I'm talking like a couple of thousand people like who are diehard for what you do, they aren't going to listen to the whole EP,
Hmm.
um, which is a problem. So like if you do like 4 great songs, they could be like some of your best material, and maybe let's say you have like 1,000 people listen to it overall. Nearly all 1,000 will listen to that first track because that's the first thing you're introducing them to. But then you'll probably lose like a third of them by the second,
Hmm. Yeah.
um, because people don't have that kind of investment in music anymore. So they will just single hop. Um, so you'll actually, to be honest, better off with engagement if you just keep doing singles, and that way people only have like the one thing to focus on.
Yeah.
Um, because you aren't going to get everybody who wants to explore all the material. So I think you can have the risk of, oh, I wanted this really cool song at the start of my EP, and this like what's actually probably the single in the middle, and then no one gets to the one that's actually really good.
Hmm.
And so you lose everybody on the first song.
It's a shame that, isn't it? It's a shame, like,
Yeah,
I don't know, just how over time we've managed to, I don't know, shorten our attention spans to the point where 10 songs is too much, 4 songs is too
yeah.
much. Now it's just the one song. That's all people can seem to consume in one go nowadays. It's like, I don't know, I just can't fathom it.
Well,
It's
I
so
don't get it
bizarre.
either because I would listen quite happily to an album.
Yeah, no, same
Um,
here.
I think the big problem as well in the music industry as a whole is that as time's gone by, like big artists such as like your Lewis Capaldi's, Taylor Swift's, and stuff. Um, I genuinely think, having listened to some of their albums in the more recent years, they've started to become really similar. And I don't mean similar to each other, but I mean similar to their own sound. So like if they've had one, like Lewis Capaldi's is a really good example because I listened to it recently. In his newest album, he had like 2 songs that I recognized, which were the singles,
Mm,
and then the rest of them, no clue. But to be honest, they weren't as good as the other singles. Like they just were not as good, but they all sounded kind of the same.
right,
Like
yeah.
if you put it from like start to end, I couldn't tell you where the songs actually were divided because they just
Yeah,
kind of flowed into each
just
other,
blend into each other, yeah.
which is really cool. But I think people get fed up of the variety. Like, and well, actually, no, people want a variety. I think is the problem. And I think sometimes there's this like play it safe problem of people going, oh, well, people like this a lot, so I want to do more of this. And so your
Mm,
whole album just becomes like ballads or something, or just becomes just piano stuff
mm,
or whatever. And unfortunately, listener fatigue is real. And a lot of people who are maybe more casual music fans will just dip in and out and go, yeah, that first song didn't do it for me, so I'm not really invested.
mm.
Um, and it is unfortunate because then it ends up with people just becoming disengaged with music and like devaluing music as a whole.
Yeah,
Um,
no, 100%.
so yeah, it is what it is. But yeah, debut album is the plan. But the
Mm,
main reason I'm going to be doing it a bit differently is because I plan to basically have every single leading up to that album as basically being a single in its own right. So it's going to be more like a compilation of the singles that
right,
have
I
come
see.
before,
Yeah, yeah.
but
It's more
packaged in
just
a nice way.
giving those singles a home in a way. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
And to be
that
honest,
makes sense.
I'll probably make some physical editions at that point. So that'll be
Yeah.
when it's like, well, if I can make some like CDs and probably like one or two vinyls if I can afford the cost of it, um, then it's like, well, anyone who's been following me the last 2.5 years will have like all 10 songs on like a nice little package, and then we can move on to like phase two, which is like more original new stuff that's a bit different. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
no, that sounds like a really nice yeah, like I don't know, just career progression plan at the moment. I'd say get those singles out, find a decent starting point, some like, build in like a bigger audience that way, and then, then once you've like built that audience, but then maybe focus on like, as you said, an album where people will be able to hold that attention for longer.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, that sounds really cool. Um, yeah, moving on to like influences and stuff like that. I know you mentioned you were really into like Queen and stuff like that at the start of your
Mhm.
like musical journey, and like stuff like that helped inspire you. Are there any other sort of major musical influences that have inspired you, or even like non-musical influences, like other forms of media or things that's happening in the world, like whatever else, anything like that, really?
Okay. There's quite I sort of condense quite a bit for you. So yeah, Queen would be my main inspiration.
Mm,
Just because I always liked the sort of rock style, even though it isn't really necessarily what I do now, but I try and take elements of it where I can. I mean, in a song that I'm releasing in a month or two called "Back to Me," it's a big ballad piece, and in the actual recording, not you don't get it in live because we couldn't do it that way, but on the recording, we've actually got a very like Brian May-esque like harmony build into like the last chorus and stuff, and it's small, but it's there, and it's like those are my influences, like when I try and put them in where I can. Um, so yeah, Queen as a whole, on guitar work especially. But I would say in terms of other elements that I really like, I always view my influences as like a sort of crossroads, because each of them kind of pulls in a different direction.
mm,
Um, so I normally put like Queen at the top. That's where usually most of my influence goes up. Um, at the bottom, I normally put Take That, actually,
right, okay.
because Take That are quite a big influence, and that's where more of my like synthy poppy sound tends to come from.
Mm,
Um, but and also I just like their choruses. All the key I have with every single influence I have is that I always like strong choruses,
right.
and that always comes through in my music. To the sort of right of that, I have Meatloaf, which is like the more theatrical side of me. Because outside of all of music influences, I do really love musical theatre. Like that is something I actually do really enjoy, and I like listening to how they compose these songs and like the storytelling in it. So that's why I like Meatloaf. And then on the opposite to that, I have like Billy Joel, who's just like
Mm,
single solo, plays a lot of stuff, but still writes meaningful stories. I guess, but has like the most diverted from like Queen and Meatloaf over there being like in the rock category, really. Um, so that's normally the four like pillars, if you like, of
yeah.
Josh McQueen music is yeah, Take That, Meatloaf, Queen, and Billy Joel. Um,
No, that's a really
so
good variety, and I could definitely hear you pulling influences from each corner of that there in your like live shows, especially. Even with like the sense of humor side of things, I think you lot have a great sense of humor on stage, and like even if people don't get the jokes, like because they're,
yeah.
inside jokes or whatever, like it's still entertaining.
Well, yeah,
Um,
I'd rather put on a bit of a show for some, for people,
yeah.
especially if we haven't seen them. Like one of the things I'm really proud of when it comes to like how we perform on stage is that nothing ever feels like that forced. It doesn't feel like, oh, we're trying to get like this really awkward laugh out of people.
Mm,
It's just we're just saying, like, half the time we don't even know what we're going to say when we walk on stage. It's just comes up. Um,
yeah. Just on the
so
fly. Yeah.
yeah, especially for local smaller gigs, it just feels a lot more natural to happen that
Yeah.
way. Um, if you're a bit too rehearsed, it can come across really weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I prefer not to rehearse jokes if I can.
Yeah, no,
Um,
you want it to come across like natural and like not, as you said, like not forced. Otherwise, people, yeah, I don't know. It just, I guess, throws people off a little bit. Like this seems
yeah.
rehearsed.
Well, yeah, it does, and to be honest, you push people away, like you disengage
Yeah,
people even more because it doesn't feel
yeah,
real.
no,
Um,
exactly.
but and but the great thing is when it came to like our audience retention, we have a great like a record for that, really. Um, Even when it was on my own, obviously with the band it's much easier, but like a most recent gig we played like the O2 a few weeks ago, well, a month ago now actually. Um, and like big room, probably about like 80, 90 people in there. roughly probably the busiest the room got, I think, for us
Right.
in the middle acts, because like the middle acts always get the busiest room. It's just how it is. And I would say we did pretty well on tickets. We sold about 14, 15. And they were like there for us. It was all really nice. So we
Mm.
were playing to like quite a big crowd for us to have pulled in just for us. Um, but obviously there was like another like 70 odd people there that weren't there for us.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when we played on stage, um, not to have my ego go out of control or anything, but like there was certainly a level of people do stop and listen to us. And I think that's partly because of the way we present the music versus the way like um I do like the comedy in between. I think people are just sort of, even if they don't like the music necessarily, they get kind of like weirdly fascinated by watching it for like 20 minutes, 20, 30 minutes. So like, yeah, we've normally at most gigs pulled either the biggest crowd or had the most people like just randomly wander in, go, oh, this is
Mm.
fun, and then just wait and just stay.
No,
Um,
that's exactly what you want though. Like if you have the ability as a band, like especially a smaller band, to grab people and keep them there,
mm,
that's like exactly what you want. Because yeah, like obviously at smaller gigs like that, a lot of people aren't gonna have heard of you before. But like if you can from doing those gigs, like hold people's attention and potentially get like, a wider audience, that's perfect. Like you're doing something right. So
yeah, that's what I like to think anyway.
yeah.
But but I do keep an eye on it. I try not to like over exaggerate the length of which that happens, but
Mm,
yeah, more often than not, I do love being in the middle of a gig because you often end up being like one of the standout acts just because you're in the middle.
mm.
Um,
I totally agree with that. I think going first or like last is probably like if I was in this situation, it'd be my personal worst nightmare. But yeah.
yeah, I mean, headliners okay. I did one headliner last August, and we actually had a fantastic crowd. Like, but the thing is, people stayed.
Mm,
So it was like once we'd started playing, people had never heard of me as being a headliner, so they thought, well, let's see what he's going to be like. And then, to be honest, I just didn't lose people. It was more just that we didn't lose people rather than people came in. If that makes sense. It was like,
right. Yeah.
luckily, it like we kept people throughout the whole show, but there was a lot of great acts on that night as well. So
Yeah.
there wasn't that like one act where everybody just lost interest.
Right. Yeah.
Which
That's good.
it's a harsh thing to say, but it does happen a lot more than you'd think. There's like one band that comes on that either doesn't fit the night quite, or like maybe they're
Oh
a bit
yeah.
new
No,
or
I've seen it.
unpracticed.
I've seen it many times.
Um,
The amount of gigs I've been to, especially at smaller venues around Birmingham, where um one act the room will be full, and the next
mm,
there'll be like literally just me taking photos, two other people and the band. It's like you just feel
yeah,
awful.
yeah, you do because like in some places I'll stand there and kind of deal with it. And I'll go, honestly, it makes me feel even more uncomfortable just being here. And there is like a herd mentality to it. Like if people start leaving, it starts becoming more and more awkward. People just start leaving again. And
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
it's kind of a domino effect. So once some people start like visibly leaving, other people start doing the same.
they'll take the cue and
Yeah.
jump ship as well. Yeah, no, yeah, it's sad, but there's not really much you can do about it, is there?
No,
Uh,
no. I mean, my only advice to anybody who suffers from that problem is just rehearse and just do as
mm,
much as you can. And like,
yeah,
you're going to lose some people anyway, but like, whatever you do, just don't let it affect your performance. Because if
yeah,
your performance is still good, you will retain people. It's just
mm,
like you won't get everybody. Like,
yeah.
it's just how it is.
No, it's out of your control. I mean, a lot of these bands, they're doing a perfectly fine job. Like they're not doing anything wrong. It's just how the cookie crumbles.
Oh yeah, and people just haven't heard of you
Mm,
yet.
yeah,
And like I met a guy called Barney on my second ever gig, and he's great. And he's just a solo guy. He was really nervous. It was his first like proper gig, and like he was on first. He did a really good job. I thought he had a really nice voice, really nice keys. I could tell he was nervous. But he pulled in like two or three people maybe, like at most.
mm,
And like he did a great job. But now, like fast forward like a year and a half later, I still follow him and still keep in contact. And like he had a video on TikTok and Instagram that just blew up, like blew up. And when he was like busking, and it was just one of those like real captured videos that just like really took off. And has it like changed his life? I don't think so, but it has, I think, shown how much he's come like along, and how much his like branding has got stronger, and how much he is like going to be now being slightly more recognized, or at least have a few people in Birmingham who will now go and see him because they've seen that video
yeah.
or whatever else. So it's like you never know with any act, to be honest, at what point they either flop or like fly, basically. Um,
No,
and
100%.
I always say it to everybody, but like don't judge hardly anybody from like their first performances or like their first few shows because it's not going to be accurate to how they actually are the
Mm,
rest of the
mm.
time.
Yeah, no, 100%. So yeah, speaking of shows, me personally, I was introduced to you and your band through the Future Sound Project Weekender this last February at the Sunflower Lounge.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get a bit more sort of, yeah, just information on how that opportunity came about and sort of what it was like to be at that event. Because obviously that's like quite a big opportunity to be, surrounded on a lineup with like a lot of other
Mm.
up and coming acts, especially younger acts.
Yeah.
So yeah, how was that?
Oh, it was really good. So the opportunity came up itself because me and Future Sound Project, they gave me my first ever gig as well. So like we go back a few years now.
Right, okay, that's good.
So I don't ever search out gigs to be quite honest, which sounds weird, but like they just ask me. So they tend to go, oh, we haven't booked in Josh for ages. We'll just ask him if he's free for like this random gig on whatever day, and I'll usually say yes because to be honest, like I do my best to keep my schedule free where I can so I can be more flexible. Because to be honest, in this industry, if you can't be flexible with your time, you're kind of dead
Mm,
in the water. Like you do kind of have to just make exceptions, which is why I like being on my own rather than as a band because as a band I couldn't say yes to like over half of these things because like I wouldn't be in charge and I have to ask everybody. So by the time we've like debated about whether we can do it or whether we can't do it, then probably the answer is like no, we can't do it. You know, so it's much easier when I can just point and say yes, we're doing it, and then tell everyone the date and say can you do it, can you not?
mm,
It's much simpler that way. So yeah, that's how it actually came about. Like I've worked with them a few times. There's a few promoters I've worked with in Birmingham. Um, to be honest, they are always a bit patchy, depending.
right.
Um, because the way that the promoter system works, I can't say I fully agree with, in the sense that promoters don't really promote anything anymore. They certainly used to, but nowadays, and this is like goes for all of them as far as I'm concerned right now, unless you're dealing with someone who is like a national promoter where they actually have like money to throw around in a marketing budget,
Yeah.
um, what you'll get is you'll get a poster, like two posts on their story about the gig coming up, alongside the other 8 gigs that they're also trying to plug. Um, and you know, that will kind of be the reach that they will have on Instagram or whatever. And that's fine. Like there'll be a couple of people who will come along to that. But on the whole, people really have an adverse effect to being marketed to. Um, so it's difficult to promote. I understand. I'm not saying that that's their problem, but they
Yeah.
do take quite a big cut of the money that we earn, and that makes it quite difficult to get along with sometimes. Um, so I try to work with like the better promoters, to be honest. So yeah, they're good. Um, so yeah, the takeover was an interesting experiment because there were a lot of bands on that night. Um, and yeah, like I was on first. I'm sure you remember, and it was a weird place to be in on first on that because it was like, well, we hadn't sold that many tickets, so I understand why we were kind of where we were. But it was like, yeah, this is going to be interesting because we our music is very like middle of the set kind of music, you know, like
Mm,
if you open with it, cool. But like we are going to bring the energy up to here, and then depending on what the next person's doing, it's probably going to go like that, or you know, it's like not very predictable. Um, so luckily, it was a good place to start for us. But it's a bit of a shame we went just a little bit deeper into the pack because obviously then more people have like seen us and whatever. Um,
yeah. No, I get that.
but you know, as far as I'm concerned about the other people, it's quite weird to think now that I'm one of the older musicians on the scene now. And that's quite scary because I've been like on the Birmingham like scene for 8 years.
Mm,
Um, so the idea that I'm now becoming like one of the old people that still does it, because like most of my generation of musicians all quit over COVID and never came back. Um,
right. Yeah. I totally didn't
so
even
to
consider that.
so to be honest, like I mean, the statistic was quite worrying. Like at all levels in the music industry, I think the last stat I heard was like during COVID, about 60% of the music industry quit in a
That's
year.
insane. Yeah.
And we're talking about session musicians, touring musicians, local musicians, anybody at every level, 60% gone.
Mm,
Um, and it was depressing. But that means like if I'm in just the 40% that survived the purge, if you like there really aren't many of us left now that were here before COVID.
Yeah, I guess there's been like a kind of a reset, hasn't there, in a way, in that sense. We've lost, like as you said, like a good majority of, say local acts or acts in general, but now we've had a completely new wave come in to replace that.
Yeah,
So, and that's kind of what we're seeing now on the Future Sound lineups and stuff like that.
definitely,
So,
definitely. They're getting younger and younger. Like I'm like they're
yeah,
18,
really are.
19 now very often. And honestly, it's gonna get to the point where I'm gonna start being called like granddad because like I'm just getting like too old.
You're like the boomer
Um,
of the lineup.
I
People would say
am.
maybe. Yeah.
I fully am like one of the boomers. I mean, like, there's a fantastic performer called Midge who plays a lot, and she's the only other person I know that's older than me that's at the same stage as me. So like, she's what 27, 28, and she's doing her like PhD while just doing this for like fun on the side. But she's
Hmm.
the only other person I know that is like even as old or older than me, um, doing it right now. There's like one other band called Pip. They're really great, and they,
I've heard of
you know,
them. Yeah.
they were formed at BIM, I think. But Isabel, the bass player and one of the vocalists, or backing vocalists, we actually went to college together. So she's one
Right.
of the few
Okay.
people that like actually survived and like continued afterwards. But she also used to be in a band called Carcosa.
Hmm.
Um, and again, they were all my college friends, if you like. So a lot of bands that have been sort of mid successful in Birmingham have usually been my friends from college. But a lot of them have now broken up because of
Yeah.
various reasons.
No, it's sad. It's disappointing that it had to, go that way. But
Yeah. I mean, Carcosa's particularly because they were tragic, as they actually found success in South Korea. Um,
really,
yeah, they actually broke South Korea,
that's
which was
crazy.
quite
In like
impressive.
what way? Did they have like a charting song or something? Or
Kind of. It not even it didn't even chart. Like it was, it was one of those really weird like pocket things that happened. So they were just minding their own business in like 2017 or so. We'd all left college not long, and they released like one new song called Sheffield, and it was their best song, still their best known song, even though they've all broken up now. Um, and they were just sending it. They had like a strategy to just DM loads of people with followers and just send them the link to the song and say, "Hey, I really appreciate it if you'd listen to this, and like if you really like it, can you share it with your followers? Like just to like get the word out." And they just did it, like just found people with like high numbers, didn't take much notice, did it, and then they got a reply from this girl who said like, "Oh wow, I really love it. Like I will actually send it to my followers," and they were like, "Oh, that's really nice." What they hadn't noticed is that this girl was actually in South Korea, because they thought they were targeting like UK people. Nope,
right,
they hadn't. They'd missed the ball entirely and target someone in South Korea. But she actually was, in the best term, an influencer, and so she put it on her story. And I kid you not, overnight their streaming numbers like shot up by a few thousand.
that's insane. Yeah,
It was an incredible reach. Um,
completely
but
by
you know,
chance as well. Yeah,
yeah.
just
So they had because in South Korea they're exotic, like to some extent. So they actually got picked up by a South Korean record label and they got shipped over to Korea to go and play some gigs. Like, and every
wow,
single one was like sold out.
that is insane.
Um, yeah, and they even had Korean fans turn up in the UK for their other gigs.
No way.
Um, and
It's
I met some
crazy.
of them.
It's
They were
crazy how
lovely to
that can
speak to.
happen. Crazy how that can
Um,
happen. And then that's it.
yeah,
Suddenly, you're that band that's like, big in Japan or big in Korea or big in Mexico, wherever else it is.
yeah, yeah.
It's like crazy.
It was a
Um,
bit weird. It was even weirder to watch them go through it from a distance. But yeah, and unfortunately, like obviously the band broke up after that, not long, a few years after that tour, and it was kind of making money. But the implication was that I always understood there was a lot of band drama and friction, and like as always, when something goes well out of nowhere, people then kind of egos get involved, and like people want to start like grabbing credit for everything, and
hmm.
from what I understood, it turned into quite like a bitter scenario as time went by, really. And so then they split up over COVID because it was like the most obvious not like stopping point. Um, so yeah, but that's just random like music Birmingham facts I know from the last like 5 years.
No, I had no idea that was a thing. So thank you for sharing that. That's honestly really cool. So, um, yeah, no, thanks for that. Awesome. So, Yeah, I guess to continue with sort of my questions here and on the topic of like future sound and like the local scene and stuff like that.
Yep.
I feel like overall, from what I've gathered from photographing like the local scene over the last few years, there's like a great sense of community there, certainly. Especially surrounding like younger bands and like just younger acts in the scene in general. It feels like there's like, a great like support system in place there with like people, hyping each other up, showing up for each other's shows, booking each other on lineups, stuff
Yeah.
like that. Um, yeah, and I know you like kind of tackled this kind of thing a little bit previously, but yeah, like how does that kind of sense of community and like support from other bands like feel to you? It must be quite a big, I guess, like staying point and like definitely encourage you to keep going, keep pushing with it and stuff like that.
Yeah. I would agree on that, really. Like the community spirit in Birmingham, I'd say is one of the better ones I've seen.
Mm,
Probably nationally, to be quite honest. Like I've played in Guildford and around the London areas. That sense of community just doesn't exist.
mm,
Um, with the main reason being that, to be honest, it's too big. Like
yeah.
to some extent, like there are too many bands in London. And so yes, you will meet some people and you'll be able to network to a little degree. Um, and that's why, in many ways, a lot of acts will book people that they know because they'll be like, oh well, they were kind of good. I'll ask them if they want to play another show with us. Um, and that will happen more because it's too big to some extent. But yeah, a sense of general community doesn't really exist. Um, in Birmingham and places probably like Manchester, Liverpool, there's more chance for a community to develop because the people who are playing here normally will be the people who are just here. And that will be limited to maybe like 40, 50 bands, at any one time, probably. Having said that, there is a lot of new music coming up at the moment, like a lot of new musicians and acts, and they're already great.
Mm,
Um, Weirdly, the community has changed in the last couple of years, and I think that's partly to do with the horrible COVID again.
yeah.
Um, and to be honest, it's very interesting because it's come with good and bad. So on the good side, I think the people coming through now are the more serious people, are the more like dedicated and like they know what they want. And even though you could say that their dreams are like necessarily unrealistic, it's like,
Mm,
well, at least they have a dream to like go after. Whereas some people were clearly just going through the motions and got fed up, eventually. But the biggest drawback I've noticed to the current community is that because we've lost so many people from like the previous generations of like musicians, um, there's been a little bit of like etiquette that's been lost as time's gone by. So the people sort of, I'd say 21 to like 24, 25, they tend to be more of it in a community right now.
yeah.
So there's this kind of level of we're all kind of still in the same generational gap as well. So we'll all talk to each other more. We'll ask each other questions like, "Oh, that was really great," or whatever else. Be more supportive in general. What I'm noticing as the younger crowd are coming through is that because obviously a lot of them couldn't even drink when COVID happened, and like couldn't go out to any of these shows like properly. There's been a little bit of like social etiquette that's been lost. So like
Mm,
I'm noticing that younger like 18, 19-year-old bands and like college bands, they're the ones that are particularly in a way just not including themselves in the community. And it's a real shame because it feels like whether it's because they think we're uncool because we're so old, or whether it's because like um they just don't know how to act in that scenario from a social perspective. There's a lot of awkwardness of like they'll just kind of watch from afar and go, but you'll never speak to them the whole show because they just won't come and speak to you.
mm,
And you can make effort with them, but they won't necessarily always talk back, properly, or like we'll just kind of do very short replies to like end the conversation as quickly as possible.
mm.
And it's a shame because like they're kind of only hurting themselves. But unfortunately, it kind of spreads to their fan base as well, which kind of becomes a problem. So like, they now have die-hard fan bases that will turn up for this like 18, 19-year-old band. And then they will just leave
Right,
after
yeah.
that act's finished. And sometimes that is what's creating this like vacuum of people occasionally because they're like, oh well, I've seen my friends, now I can go. Whereas
Yeah.
there was a little bit more of an established etiquette before COVID that like if you were going to a gig, that was what you were doing tonight. Like, you know what I mean? You stayed for everybody, even if like they weren't always your thing. The idea was to like have a night out.
Mm.
Um, but I think obviously with COVID killing nightclubs and bars and everything else, I think just the going out culture has kind of suffered a little bit in general.
Yeah.
Um, People are just
No.
doing more for themselves, I guess, in their own time slots, which is like in some ways a good thing, but it also means some of the like social aspect of like pub drinking or night clubbing or going out to see gigs and stuff is kind of diminished a little bit.
Mm.
Um,
I definitely know what you mean. Even outside of like the scene in general that we're talking about now, just like that concert etiquette has shifted quite dramatically. Yeah, just because, yeah, as you said, like I feel like those younger generations have just missed out on a lot of important things regarding that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. It can't really be prevented that easily. I feel like that's kind of something that's going to have to change again over time. But
Yeah, it might
yeah,
also be that we just lose a generation of listeners, like, and that's not unheard of.
maybe.
Like,
Yeah, maybe.
um, so I have a feeling right now that the people sort of I'd say 17 to 20 at this moment will probably be a lot less invested in like local music. But as with everything, it seesaws. So probably what will happen is like the people who are like 14, 15 now, in about 4 or 5 years, you'll see a culture change again.
Hmm.
Um, that it could even be different to what's happening now. It'll be probably very different to what happened before. Um, the community and like the sort of support network is constantly evolving, constantly changing. And to be honest, I just try and navigate that as best I can because a lot of people have this attitude of we want to change it to be something else, and it's like you can't. Like it is what it is right now.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and would I love to see an even more supportive network? Because theoretically, if loads of musicians got together and decided to put on our own shows rather than go through promoters, we could all make a lot more money to start off with. And to be honest, it's more likely we'd get better events because the thing is
Hmm.
we'd be pairing ourselves with people who we know fit what we're all doing. So you do a bit of like cross pollination between like fan bases a lot more.
Yeah.
Um, so if we were in charge of running it, great. It actually would be the best scenario. The problem is there's always this like reserved part of people that kind of doesn't want to collaborate, which makes it difficult because they're like, well, I'll take part, but I won't organize it.
Yeah.
Or, and like, so that's fine, but it does mean at the end of the day, you need somebody to spearhead it. And I have several times considered putting myself up for some kind of role within a promotion setting, whether that be a business or like a cooperative type scenario where it's like, we have just a group of bands together who all make decisions and like vote more like a council. Um, and one day that might happen, but the problem is just the logistics and the organization capacity that it takes to organize these things is to some extent currently more trouble than it's worth to a lot of the people who kind of are okay with the status quo right now. I think that will change, but I think that will only change as those people have stayed here in the scene longer and longer and then decide actually we could make this better.
Hmm.
um, and this isn't a uniquely Birmingham problem. I actually Birmingham has one of the most promising music scenes for variety, to be honest. Like there is everything in Birmingham.
No, without a doubt. Yeah.
And I think it really could be a really great place for culture and music and stuff like that to grow. I just think at the moment, with council support or like government support or whatever it is, there just is not enough there right this second to actually really help those people progress, I
Hmm.
suppose. So yeah, community is super important, and I think people will become more and more close as time goes by. And it has improved in the last year, I would say that. But yeah, when I first came back in 2021, it was very strange. People just were acting very differently to how they used to act.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, like it's changed, but it's changed not necessarily for the worst. It's just changed.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, fair
so yeah,
enough. But yeah, no, that all makes perfect sense. But yeah, back on the topic of what you were saying there about, Birmingham being obviously so like culturally diverse and stuff like that. Obviously, it goes without saying, it's very well known that Birmingham is like an extremely diverse city, with a range of different backgrounds that are, very present and very, out there and loud all over the city. You know, it's hard not to notice all of that, you know, amazing stuff that happens there. Would you say this side of things is like accurately reflected within the local music scene today? And if not, how can we make that more inclusive overall, would you say?
Mm. It's a fascinating question because, like,
Mm,
to be honest, we are a massively diverse region of the country. Um, like outside of really London, we're like the next most diverse.
yeah, no, 100%.
And like the population density is partly a factor because it's shocking to me when people say like Birmingham, why is Birmingham the second city? I'm like, because it's massive, partly. Um, and people don't believe it because it's like they think, well, Manchester's about the same size. I'm like, no, it isn't. Like, you don't understand how much bigger Birmingham is than
Mm,
Manchester. I've been to both, and like Manchester's a lovely place. I understand why they want to be the second city. Don't get me wrong, but when I looked at the population figures just for like the Dudley borough, which isn't even technically Birmingham,
no, yeah.
there's over 1 million people just in Dudley.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm serious. There's 1 million people in the borough of Dudley, which
That's
is where technically I
crazy.
live, right? And it's also one of the most diverse boroughs in the country, like outside of London. And that's not even part of the Birmingham central bit. Like
No, yeah.
it's just a side like suburb in a way. So yeah, like the population factor is like by a times 10 or something.
Mm,
So it's like London has about 12 or 13 million of like the 2019 census people in like the inner like centers of London, like 13, 14 million. We're in Birmingham plus Dudley, like maybe like 2 or something million people in the
yeah.
Midlands.
No, it's a lot.
Um, 2 or 3 million. Manchester's like a few 100,000.
Yeah. No,
Like
mo
people
most
don't realize how
cities,
much the gap is.
yeah, most cities in the
um,
UK are only a few hundred thousand. We're
yeah.
like Birmingham is quite a significant like bit above those, definitely.
Yeah, but
Um,
in terms of diversity, yeah, sure. Like I love the range of diversity of people here. It's one of the main reasons why when I come back here from anywhere else, pretty much I feel more like at home.
mm,
Because I've been on holiday space like Cornwall and stuff, and I'm not digging those areas whatsoever, but they are like the whitest counties you'll ever go to, you know, and like the kind of
no,
thing where
100%.
the most exotic thing you will get is maybe there's a Chinese or an Indian somewhere
Mm,
like takeaway, and it's like that's it. That's like the limit of their adventurousness. And it's like I couldn't imagine how boring Birmingham would be right now if we didn't have all the curry houses, the Thai restaurants, the Japanese authentic restaurants, the you know every kind of culture um, and programs. And I love that we have like the mosques and the synagogues
yeah.
and everything. Like it's one of the most inclusive places I've ever been. That, to be honest, um, I don't think people living here feel negatively towards it
No,
either,
no, I don't think
which
so either.
is which is different because I think in London that is different. Because whenever I go to London, I tend to hear people talk shit about the diversity, about it being like, oh, there's just too many people that aren't white or like aren't originally from London here, and it's like, who cares? Uh,
Yeah,
but
like so weird.
it's a very strange take to have. But when it comes to the music scene, the weird thing is that diversity, to be honest, doesn't really translate. And it's one of the strangest phenomenons, really, to sort
Mm,
of draw a line between. Because, like, there will be, I would say, quite a few black people who will be definitely part of the music scene. Like, Pip's a good example. So, like, my friend Isabel, but like, out of the four members in that band, three are white, one's black, and
mm,
she's like the lead singer from what I know. Um, and like I in my own band had a woman called Veronica who now is in London actually. To move down there, but she used to be like one of my backy singers, and she was black. But like there are not as many as you think for how diverse the city is.
no, no, I know what you mean.
Um, it's unfortunately it's very stereotypically middle class white kids who
Mm,
have instruments and can afford to like rent out pirate studios.
yeah,
That is kind of your demographic right now, and there probably are scenes that I'm not necessarily part of. So like if there's like an underground rap scene or a grime scene or anything like that where disproportionately more people are not white, um, those those are always good places for those
mm,
communities. And so I think that there definitely is catering for it. I don't know if I'm like the authority to speak on it because like it's, to some extent I probably haven't been to all the places where those people go, if that makes sense.
mm,
But certainly when it comes to like local gigs at a pub, predominantly white.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
in both audiences and and performers, and it's a shame because I wish there was a bit more variety, but I don't know. I don't know who to put that on really. Like, I don't know if that's a promoter's responsibility. Like, are the
Mm.
promoters booking too many white people? Um, you know,
It's certainly something to question, like to consider. Like, are we booking too many of like the same band, even like just a bunch of
mm,
replicas of like the same kind of, groups over and over and over again? Could we mix it up a bit more?
yeah,
But
maybe. I mean, like, I think the
yeah,
weird thing about me and my band is like, yes, currently everybody is white. But I think even within ourselves, we have a level of diversity because one of the weird, like, we don't publicize it really, but one of the weird things about the Josh McQueen like group, if you like, is that every single one of us is part of the LGBTQ. That
yeah,
there isn't a
yeah.
single person who is straight in that band, and and it's
No,
kind of fun
that's
because
that's
like
fair.
it's like yeah, we are all like technically white, but and we are, but at the same time, we still represent a part of Birmingham's culture that isn't
Mm.
just straight white.
That was one
Um,
thing I was going to mention. The LGBT community does feel present in the in like the central Birmingham scene, kind of like where you guys fit in, or like other bands that
there are
I've
very
covered.
few straight people in the music
Um,
scene in Birmingham.
yeah, no, that it's
Um,
very yeah, no, that culture is definitely very present, which I think is amazing, obviously.
mm,
Um, but yeah, I feel like a lot of other cultures in Birmingham, I feel like they do kind of just split off into their like subgroups or subcultures, and they'll just
yeah,
play shows within that culture. Not really, things don't really mix together all that much,
no, not very often.
which would be obviously great to see. But yeah, personally, I'm not too sure on like the best way of going about how to fix that. Um,
It's not an easy thing to fix. I mean, I think promoters probably are a little bit responsible for like maybe you need to be trying not like in a horrifically forced way, but maybe
yeah,
they just need
yeah.
to be like saying, oh, actually, it'd be kind of nice if we gave some more like, or maybe the problem is just there aren't any. I don't know,
Mm,
but like if there were more black rock bands, but I do know for a fact that like within the rock community and the metal community, and I hate it, but like there is a huge issue that a lot of people in those communities have with like non-white people playing rock and metal music. I don't know why, but
mm,
there really is like there's a lot of hatred towards those sort of groups. I mean, like Skindred's a good example. And like they do a lot of like metal stuff, but obviously they sometimes play with influence, and they've had like Jamaican influences in their like reggae type stuff in their metal, and like it's really cool. I really enjoy like listening to it, and it's like I don't understand why people have that issue, but there's a lot of like metal and rock purists out there that seem to believe that like only white people can do good rock music, which is
mm.
just the most backwards logic thing I've ever seen.
I mean, they've clearly
um
not done any research,
well, yeah, it's like,
or just
well,
very ignorant if they think that.
like
Um,
nearly all of the greatest classic guitarists in blues or rock were pretty much all black.
that's
Like,
exactly what I mean.
you
Yeah,
know,
like
white people are very good at one thing, and that is like taking other people's culture and then just doing it en masse. Like that is something we've been very adept at for music, especially
yeah,
um, going all the way back to Elvis, nicking a
yeah.
lot of black culture.
Elvis, the Beatles, the whole lot of them. Yeah, like
Yeah,
yeah,
and like I won't say that they didn't do great music because they did do really good music,
yeah,
but it's like, but we can't not acknowledge that
yeah.
this is where it came from.
No, you can't
Um,
ignore its origins. Like that's
yeah,
not fair. Yeah.
yeah. So I do find it goes a bit tit for tat sometimes, and it's very frustrating because it's like at the end of the day, people just want to make music that they enjoy playing and listening to. I kind of get a bit frustrated when it becomes limited to whether you're white or black or Asian or anything in between. Like um, once once you set those boundaries on that music exploration, you really start boxing people again, like into like little tiny packages. It really annoys me because it's like, well, half of the like identity movement, if you like, in the last 20 years has been so that people could break down those barriers and like could start to be like, well, I might be black, but I want to play this, or I might be white, but I want to help like contribute to this, or
Hmm.
whatever else. And that's kind of what we should be aiming for. It's not. It's always a lot like easier said than done, but
Yeah, yeah.
um, yeah, breaking down those like cultural boundaries, especially around music, is tough.
Hmm.
I mean, like in a weird way, Eminem's quite a strange example of this. Because like when Eminem came on the scene, obviously like a lot of people thought, well, white boys can't rap. Um, and did he prove them wrong? Definitely. But he is
Hmm.
still very niche, theoretically. Like he is like one of the biggest white rappers to some extent.
Or he's like the biggest rapper, like regardless
Yeah,
of
I think possibly he's the
skin
biggest
color.
rapper.
Yeah,
Um,
which is kind of
even if
crazy.
even if you count someone like Drake or something, who has like probably the most singles, I think, or the most streams, or used to. I think someone dethroned him not long
I
ago.
think the weekend might have dethroned him.
Yeah, it was
But,
the weekend, I think,
mm,
possibly. But you know, it's like people can pretty much succeed in nearly any genre, and it's a bit silly that we keep saying that, oh no, you need to stick over here and we need to stick over here, because
mm.
I just think it's not very helpful. um, so
No,
yeah, I don't
yeah,
know. Maybe that bleeds through into the scene, and the promoters, that sort of unconscious bias of oh,
maybe,
if we
yeah.
want cute indie music, we're gonna have to hire a really sad looking indie girl or a really sad looking indie boy, you know?
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it's just doing whatever fits their like I don't know, whatever fits the audience best, that they're kind of like marketing towards, I guess.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, I'm not like by all means, I'm not saying people should like force culturally diverse lineups just for the sake of doing it. But I think if you're doing things, even on the topic of like future sound, if you're really going to do
yeah.
like an accurate future sound representation of somewhere like if you're doing it primarily on like Birmingham or somewhere like that, um, if it's going to be accurate, you need to like cover everything,
Mm.
like cover all the ground there. Otherwise, is it really authentic or is it
I'm
really like level in that sense? You
To be
know?
honest, you have given me an idea though. I do think one of the things that maybe promoters do miss out on now is they probably need to have more genre focus nights,
Mm. That
which
would
would
that would
probably
definitely
help.
help. Yeah, that would definitely
Um,
help.
because like if they said, oh, tonight is going to be like a rock night, and I know that they're going to be worried that like, oh, we're going to like push away people who wouldn't go and see a rock gig, and it's like you might, but you also might just attract the right kind of crowd to the gig that you're actually trying to plug.
Mm.
Um, and obviously, then if it's a rock night, pick the people who do rock stuff, and they could be from any background you want. Just pick rock people, and then you'll find an audience that vibes with it.
Yeah.
Um, the issue with a lot of promoters I have is consistency. They aren't consistent at all with how they approach things or how they do things. So
Yeah.
like the Future Sound project in the Sunflower is a good example, because like obviously it was a new thing they were trying. It was like a weekend festival type thing, and I don't think they'll ever do it again.
Mm.
And the only reason I don't think they'll ever do it again is because I do not see how that for them was financially a great plan. Um, or like for anybody involved, how that would work. Because like a lot of audiences are not going to stick around for 6 hours of their day on a weekend to
Yeah.
watch bands they've never heard of, um, in a very small room that's quite warm. Um,
Yeah, I know
and
what you
and
mean.
like on paper, it sounds like a great plan. I just think in practice, it isn't realistic. Like you're much better off reducing the amount of acts, and having a more like concentrated set time. I understand wanting to have like maybe multiple gigs with a theme. That would have been cool. But
Mm.
like I think having one mega day is never going to be the way to get people to go to like a gig, to be quite honest. People will just get fed up. Even the other acts that go on, because of the weird changeovers you have to do, even
Mm.
they won't stick around because they've got to leave at some point. Um, so you know, you kind of accidentally push out literally everybody that would have stayed,
Yeah.
if you just made it shorter.
Yeah, I'll
Um,
tell you, it wasn't easy photographing both days of that from start to finish.
yeah, yeah. I don't envy you on that
A
really.
very yeah, action-packed day, I'll say that. But yeah.
Yeah, it was. So you know, I'm still perfectly friendly with the Future Sound project, but I'm like, yeah, it was a risky experiment when I saw they'd advertised it as like a festival thing,
Mm.
but yeah, the problem is like that will go badly now, and now they'll never do anything interesting again for the next 6 months, and they'll try something again that doesn't work, and it'll be too experimental.
Mm.
And I think their biggest issue, like I said, is just no consistency. They have no like consistency when it comes to planning gigs or like what themes the gigs are. Like if they said every month we have a rock night here, and then like you just stick with it, even if it's not that profitable, for like 2 years, try and stick with it for like over a year, 12 months. And even if you're not making a lot of money on it, eventually people will understand that, oh, it's rock night at here tonight, or like, oh, it's like the metal night here, or it's the reggae night here. um and if you actually market it and be consistent, people will slowly be
Mm.
invested in and remember what things are doing on what days. It's like how like Wednesday is always student night, like because everybody knows it's student night because they've been sticking at it for like years. So you know it does, it's a small percentage, but people will take that into account. And so like yeah, I just think they have a bit too much randomness going on at the minute, and it would be better if more often they could lock down venues and lock down sort of events in a sort of time slot so that we could actually like go, oh, it'll be like a rock night that will be on in a few months,
Yeah,
and we'll know when that is, rather than them having to sort of panic book everybody a month before, which is often how things go. And even if it doesn't go that way, the ones that do have much more time will often be like, well, here's the tickets. You've got like 2 or 3 months. Sell all of them if you can. And like that's probably my preferred approach because you actually get a bit more time to like run up to it and build momentum
mm,
to it.
yeah,
Whereas yeah, sometimes you will just get a gig that's like, oh, we need someone like 2 weeks before the gig to like fill this slot, and you always say, well, they've clearly just had someone drop out and they now
mm,
really desperately need somebody because like very often that is the slots I've taken actually, slots people haven't been in. Um, so you can end up with really patchy days. But yeah, overall, I think that's a very long-winded answer. But yeah, I think diversity's good, but we can always do more. Like
yeah.
there's
There's always
always
more that could be done.
always more we can do. Um, so yeah, that's
No,
probably what I
yeah, no, that answers that perfectly fine. Yeah, no, thanks for that. Yeah, I think I mean I've had you for more than enough time. I think now I've had you for probably twice as long than we
Yeah,
initially
I do
intended.
talk a lot.
That's fine. You've given
Even
me,
my
more than
even
enough
my
content here, so
that's fine. I mean, even my job interviews go on for like half extra of the time they say they are. If it's an hour interview, we're going to be on the on. I'm talking to them for like another half an hour at least.
right, yeah.
So yeah, it is what it is.
Nah, it's fair
um,
enough. I might have to let my other scheduled guests know that, maybe we'll push it to an hour just in case I end up dragging them along for longer than we intended as well. But yeah, no, it's been lovely talking to you anyway, and thanks for,
yeah, it's been good.
giving me this insight into the scene and all that stuff. It's been really helpful.
Yeah, no problem.
Before we conclude things, is there anything else you'd like to sort of promote or plug before we finish things off?
Yeah, I mean, like, in the next month or so, I'm gonna have Back to Me, the next single coming out. We hope. I haven't got a solid release date yet because in a way I'm still trying to sort of promote Imposter. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, soon there'll be sort of notifications on that. And if people want to go and like follow me on my Instagram and TikTok, it's always really appreciated because to be honest, like those are now a musician's lifeline. If you don't have the followers, you don't get the attention from anybody.
mm,
And so like most artists, if you get past like I'd say about 5 to 10K followers, record labels actually start taking you seriously. Like it's around that point that they
yeah,
start actually going, wait, they might be onto something.
mm.
Um, so go follow me there on Josh McQueen official, and so yeah, it's been good. It's been really lovely, and there'll be more music to come, and that's it, really.
Awesome. Yeah, no, go go follow Josh McQueen, as they said, and yeah, no, thanks again for joining, and yeah, have a nice rest of your day.
Yeah, you too.